to Raj, Tamara, Mark, and Paul for the previous session. Stimulating as always. I think I'm right in saying this is that you are the oasis of this gig. You are the closers. It is the Legends stage, and I'm currently joined by Natalie and Simon. We're hoping that Vicky and Daniel will arrive shortly. But we shall fire on because I can only see one screen. Vicky and Daniel, if you do turn up, just shout, "I'm here," and I can bring you into the fold. Um, Welcome. I'm sort of doing it slightly different to this morning. I'm going to ask you if you can just to introduce yourself. Tell us what you do on a day-to-day basis, and then two questions: the challenge you are battling with today at work and the value you find most important in your life, not the company's life, in your life, your North Stars. So, because I can see Natalie directly in front of me, Natalie, why don't you go first? So, who you are, what you do, the challenge you're battling with, and your value.
Sure. Thank you very much and good afternoon. My name's Natalie Rogers. I'm the Chief People and Sustainability Officer at N Brown. For those of you who don't know anything about N Brown, we're an online fashion digital retailer. We offer fashion products, but we also have a financial services business which offers credit to our customers to be able to purchase our products. I guess the thing that I am really battling with at the moment is just the velocity of change that we are having to navigate, both as an operating committee, but also the amount of change that we are pushing into the organisation. And that's a function of the macroeconomic challenges that we're facing and the headwinds that we're having to respond to as a retail business. But equally, just the volume of change and that velocity of change and the resilience of the organisation to kind of cope with that change and adapt to that change, if I'm honest. And I think the value that I kind of pride myself most on right now is transparency, because I think when you're going through the velocity of change and the amount of change that we are, that transparency with colleagues is really critical, because it's not just the what, it's the why of the change. So that why bit is incredibly important right now.
Brilliant. I'm just going to pick up before we just move on to Simon. You're talking velocity of change, and they say I watched the Red Roses play in the final on Saturday, and they won the World Cup. And there's this graceful character at the back called Ellie Kildun. And whilst everyone's flying around, she glides. So in a work context, so they often say in sports, someone looks like they've got time on the ball, which means they're seeing things, their heart rate is slow, they're breathing, they're making good decisions. How can you help people cope with that, with such speed of change?
So I think as an operating committee, it's about finding those moments where you can step away from the sort of the kind of, I guess, the noise and the change, and stepping back and actually just reflecting on the decisions that we're making and the implications of those decisions and the impact that we're observing it's having on the organization. So that's the kind of top-down view. Yeah. I think it's also from a bottom-up perspective, it's actually allowing the organization some breathing space to process the change as well. So, at the moment, we're probably coming to the bottom of the change curve. I am very conscious that as we come out of the change curve, we go into probably the busiest period of time for us as a retailer, which is, the end of the year. How do we give the organization some breathing space to recover, but also set them up as we need them to kind of think about, supporting us through that peak trading period as well. So we've got a number of different initiatives that we're going to be, launching into the organisation to sort of do that.
I loved working with Dana Strong. She's an amazing lady who runs Sky. She says, people call me Greens, by the way, if I'm saying my name is Greens. Greens, she says, there's always time. Just sit on it, let it breathe. The answer often will reveal itself. Just don't go sprinting off in 37 different directions, trying to fix and plug every hole all at the same time. So, no, it's really interesting to hear that. Thank you so much, Natalie. Simon, who are you? What challenge are you battling with? And what's your most important value?
Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. Good to be here today. So I'm Simon Clements. I am the Group Talent Director at Drax Group, which is a FTSE 250 energy and utilities company. We are a renewable energy company, which was well known for our power station up in North Yorkshire, but has grown significantly for M&A over the last few years with acquisition of hydro assets up in Scotland and a pellets business throughout North America. And I have the privilege of leading our talent strategy and our people and culture function. What are we challenged with? I feel like probably similar to Natalie's and maybe maybe everyone else's in a people function. Change and transformation is certainly sort of top of the agenda for us. We've got a big transformation program on called Future Focus at the moment, and I think in my day job, the piece that I guess I'm most focused on is how do we retain engagement and performance whilst we're kind of steering the organization through significant change. And there's kind of many layers and elements to that, but obviously people are the beating heart of our organization, right? So if we don't get the human piece right, then all of the change and transformation will not work, or certainly not as it's intended to. So lots within that, but I think that's the big challenge. And value, I think what you were saying in life, so maybe not so much work value. I don't know if anyone's heard of Ubuntu. It's an old African saying, which I have Ubuntu, Ubuntu, which is something we have by the door of our family home, and it's essentially about compassion and humanity, right? And it's the kind of theory that anyone that kind of walks into your home should feel welcome and at ease. I think that's a lovely value that I don't always get right, but I do my best.
My wife is an absolute Jedi at that. She just makes everyone feel. I'm sort of slightly paranoid and neurotic from my mother's side of the family. We have a sort of serious insecurity about which is what's good enough to get me here isn't good enough to get me there. So I'm constantly in a sort of state of flux and panic about I can't ever sell. Whereas my wife is just slow down. Welcome people. Time is what you can give people. So Ubuntu, I love it. I will channel my inner Ubuntu when I get home tonight on my wife's birthday. I don't actually, because I can only see one at a time. Vicky and Daniel, have either of you arrived?
I think it looks like the dynamic duo.
I love it. So never underestimate what a small group of people can, in fact, make change. In fact, it's the only thing that ever did change the world. So we've got Simon and Natalie for the next half hour talking about a variety of different topics. And we're going to crack off with culture v strategy. We had a fascinating debate on it today. And I'm going to be slightly less specific this afternoon in this sort of two ball and try and just move it around a little bit more and just go, look, blank canvas, culture v strategy, which side do you sit on? Let's head to Natalie first. What side do you sit on? Where's the nuance? Where does one borrow from the other? An absolute blank canvas. Go for it.
Oh, so I probably sit on both sides of the fence if you can do that, because I think there's that symbiotic relationship with both. So, you can't have one without the other fails, in my experience. And I think if you look at the research, obviously companies with a strong culture, that absolutely drives sort of growth and better financial sort of performance. So I guess that's where I sort of sit, really, that you can't do one without the other. Yes. And focus and lean in more on one at your peril, I would say, as an organization, because at some point you'll come up against one getting in the way of the other.
So I'm going to push it. We said, I know we spoke off camera a little bit about not being too aggressive with awkward questions, but so I can sort of see you going 50-50. But if it was 51% of one and 49% of the other, I'll bare my soul first in terms of I'm a culture guy. I come from a team thing, and I go, do you know what? We can get a new strategy, or we can find a different product to sell. But I want to be with the right. I want to be with the right people. So where would you go on about that's just my personal opinion. Where would you sit, Natalie?
I think I'd definitely be with you on that culture sort of side. And I think broader than that, because when you break down culture, what is culture? for me, it is about having that really strong set of organizational values, because I think the values kind of glue the culture together and ultimately improve your kind of employee engagement and your sort of experience, but absolutely help align colleagues and employees with that mission and vision.
Yeah.
So I think, you know, that's kind of how I see
What are the values, Natalie, at N Brown Group?
So it is operating with pace, leading with curiosity, putting our customers first. So those would be our values as an organisation.
I love leading with curiosity. It's I think it's Satya Nadella, currently the CEO of Microsoft, says, "Be a learn it all, not a know it all." And it's just it's a really cool way to live, right? You can learn something from absolutely everyone you meet. Simon, over to you. Similar sort of question. Yeah, there's nuance, but which side of the fence does your left buttock, which is slightly heavier than your right buttock, sit?
How did you know that? That's very personal. Look, I'm gonna follow Natalie's lead on that. I think culture and strategy are completely interdependent. I think they're a bit like plants and animals, right? Plants produce food and oxygen for animals, and animals pollinate and kind of disperse seeds, and you can't have one without the other. And I think the way that I always talk about it with my colleagues is like culture is an organization's personality. And I think it's the output of a company's purpose, their vision and strategy, their values and behaviors, like what Natalie was talking about, and then the colleague experience. And I think those four things create an organizational culture or personality. I really don't have, I think, you know, you can't have a great culture without a clear vision and strategy, I think.
Yeah. I mean, so Natalie's your chief people, Natalie, and Simon, your talent. So I sort of get the feeling here that I'm not necessarily preaching to the converted, but you can help me how you sort of like the champagne flute, just tip it into the first one and it flows down into the rest of the organization. You clearly get the importance of this. But within an organization that may have some KPIs for the end of the month, there's just being huge growth demand from CEOs, dividends wanted back from shareholders. How do you go about embedding culture so that culture isn't drowned out by the race for growth?
Right, yeah, big question. Well, for me, I think you have to focus on having those four things really clear, right? So any good organization has a clear purpose. You know, why do people come to work? What, you know, attracts them to join you? Why will they stay with you? You know, for us, it's enabling a zero carbon, lower cost energy future, right? So the reason a lot of people join Drax is they want to make a better planet for future generations, help remove carbon dioxide from the atmosphere within the energy and utility sector. That isn't easy, right? So we've got a really clear purpose, and then we've got a clear vision and strategy. We've got three pillars to our strategy. We've got a set of values and behaviors, and then we have essentially a colleague experience framework, the moments that matter for our colleagues that make a difference. And I think we through investing in those four things and making sure that they're really clear to everyone in the organization, almost hardwired, it's not really like culture takes a back seat when revenue demands or something is there. It's all kind of like intertwined. Maybe it's a bit that's how I see it. I don't know how all the rest of the colleagues would say the same, but yeah.
Yeah, Natalie, how do you go about trying to embed? Can you embed culture? I think you can. It's what you tolerate. It's how you walk the walk in the corridors. How do you get people living and breathing N Brown's culture on a day-to-day basis?
On a day-to-day basis, obviously, that's where you really rely, I think, very much on your leaders, really kind of living and breathing that culture, and how they then sort of cascade that through not just what they do but how they do it across the rest of the organization. So for me, I think leaders do play a really important part in terms of connecting colleagues, not just to the culture, but as Simon said, the kind of the mission, the purpose and the strategy, But I think it's also taking those moments to celebrate individuals or examples of where you see colleagues or line managers living and breathing the values and the culture, but also how you go about doing things. So, we've very much taken the view that we want to democratize things like AI in our business. So actually what we've done is created an incubator where all of the use cases come from the bottom up rather than the top down. And we've got examples of how we've democratized not just AI, but other aspects of the organization, which are strategically important to our kind of vision, mission, but also our business strategy as well.
Brilliant. Absolutely love that, because again, just because it's old doesn't mean it's good, right? And there's a lot that a Gen Z or a 22-year-old kid can teach us. I love the idea sometimes of reverse mentoring.
Yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely, with all your experience, you can mentor a 21-year-old, 22-year-old. But actually, there's a whole heap of stuff that they can come and say, well, we're just not seeing it like that anymore. The speed of change, going back to your velocity of change quote, is extraordinary. I think a superstar from BT might have joined the building. Daniel, are you in the house?
Hello, I am. Apologies, technology failed me. Although
all right,
I'm in now.
Right. How did I start with everyone? So, can you give a brief description of what you do on a day-to-day basis, the challenge you're battling with today, and your most important personal value?
So I lead the HR teams for all of the non-revenue parts of the group. So corporate units covering all of the areas you'd expect it to cover, networks, which is our physical and our mobile network, cybersecurity, digital, so in any other language, technology, but certainly encapsulating the data and the AI elements of technology and our colleague and customer journey activity. And then I finally also have the honor of leading the HR team for our India organization, which is huge for us, actually. It's about 14,500 colleagues spread across operations and technology predominantly.
Wow. And what challenge are you battling with today?
Well, it's interesting. We have a new
Other
chief
than the
digital,
tech getting
other
onto this
than tech,
webinar.
yeah, which is interesting given the areas of the business I partnered. Our chief digital officer joined us a month ago today, and we have an ambitious agenda to ensure that we've got the right focus across the digital landscape, both for colleagues and for customers, because it's absolutely critical to us winning in the market. So that's probably the biggest challenge. He's out and about doing his listening tour at the moment, which is a great way for him to connect with our colleague base and understand their views and them to get to know him.
And your most important value, personally?
I think there's an integrity point that I'll do what I say. And if I can't do it, I'll say it. And I'm not afraid of a difficult conversation. Maybe that's a positive. Maybe it's not sometimes.
And I'm a numbers guy, right?
Yes.
What are the chances that we are wearing exactly the same shirt?
It's entirely possible. Yeah, I think it might be.
That is, and we've both gone similar buttons done up.
Yeah. It's more comfortable.
From a different mother. Daniel, we need to chat. I've got to have a beer sometime. Extraordinary. But we need to liaise before we go out on what we're wearing.
Indeed, yes. Look out.
Let me go back to where we're going to go back to Simon. To talk about what professional standards should be non-negotiable in today's businesses.
Yeah, good question. I think there was a piece there on like well-being and inclusion that I think was sort of top of mind, and I think those are two fundamental aspects of any organisation today. So I think they're also both key drivers for like high performance. So if you don't foster a culture that is focused on holistic well-being for everyone and a sense of kind of inclusion and belonging, then you're not going to have a productive and high-performing workforce. I think well-being, for me, I mean, if I can talk a little just for a minute or so about kind of what they mean to me and what they mean to us at Drax. Like for well-being, it's really about, we talked about change and transformation a minute ago, didn't we? And I think well-being is about creating resilience in the organisation. So we hear about resilience a lot, but if you can help people understand their holistic well-being better, then they can build essentially more capacity to deal with the demands that not just work but life throws at them, right? So we have a program like a wellness program that looks at sleep, nutrition, exercise, and all of those three things impact on your mood. And really it's about, if you get the right sleep, if you get the right amount of exercise, if you think about how you eat and look after yourself, then you can like kind of replenish the resources that demands throws at you. So that you've got that well-being piece, and then on the inclusion side, I think it's a huge bit around psychological safety, right? Like to contribute fully to an organization and really like maximize the potential of everyone that you've got in it, then you need that psychological safety to be able to, I think Daniel was just saying about challenging like questions. You need to be able to feel safe to like have courageous conversations and create better decisions. So yeah, I don't know if that's the kind of normal professional standards, but I think those are the two things that certainly jumped
really
out.
Interesting. We did a bit of work with the Marines a long time ago, and they actually, what was yours? Sleep, diet, and exercise.
Yes, sleep,
So
nutrition,
they
and
used to talk
exercise.
about look after your shed, sleep, hydration, exercise, and diet.
Yeah,
And that was one of the things the Marines would talk about regularly, sort of way before sports nutrition came in, understanding that an army marches on its stomach and its rest. And before battle, they would send their officers to sleep first. Why are they being sent to sleep first? Because they would have to make the most important decisions the next day, and the infantrymen wanted to make sure that that's where we are. So it's always interesting how you pick up different stories, but actually it just gets passed down. I'm going to pick up the same topic, Natalie, in terms of what I was found really interesting. What Simon said is often people only talk about well-being, but actually well-being and resilience should be coupled. I think there's a time to be scared of your boss. I think there's a time to have a panic thinking I've not done the work. So how do you balance well-being with resilience when trying to get the best out of your employees?
So I mean, I agree with everything that Simon you've said, and I think from a balance perspective, I think it's important that we do maintain that balance, because I think again, if colleagues don't feel sort of, I guess their well-being is being sort of supported, they don't feel psychologically safe, then the reality is they're not going to bring their best selves to the office, are they, or show up in the best way. So, and they're not necessarily therefore going to sort of take ownership of their work, sort of, and be willing to kind of, lean into those more kind of tricky situations. So, I think, and I guess the other aspect for me, which, Simon, I think was also kind of alluding to, was if you think about the foundations of performance, I really believe that respect, fairness, and accountability aren't soft. They are the foundations of a good performance framework, and they need to be kind of hardwired into that. And you need to also be prepared to, lean into that as part of the performance conversation. And sometimes they will be difficult and uncomfortable conversations, and sometimes you'll be celebrating that as an organization as well.
Yeah. If I do it to you, Daniel, on that, thank you, Natalie, for that. Just in terms of having that sort of international with 40, I think it's 14,500 in India. How easy or difficult, or what challenges or what opportunity, let's say about positive, what opportunities does it provide to try and bring together such a smorgasbord of nationalities when trying to define a culture?
God, incredibly difficult. I think you kind of have to articulate a core set of values and purpose and behaviors that you can genuinely say span or transcend geographies and actually are just basic human behaviors that you'd want to see. And they've got to be broad enough to be inclusive. They've got to think about the different cultures within that. They've got to be specific enough, I think, to guide, decision making and behaviour, and give people a framework to operate within. And I think to the point earlier around sort of bottom up input, there's a co-creation piece as well that you allows people within the organisation to be part of defining what it looks and feels like. Yeah. We did an exercise earlier this year, which we called the Big Conversation, which was exactly that, and that's shaping a lot of what we think are cultural update, I wouldn't say necessarily a reset, would need to look like, so that it really is coming from the various different elements of our colleague base globally, not just in the UK, although BT is a very heavily UK focused company. And I think in doing that, you start to create something, a language that resonates with people, and they feel that they've inputted it, and then can hold you to account a bit and say, well, we told you, we're now seeing, or we're not seeing and hearing that which we said was important to us.
And just straight back at you, Dan, on that, because it's such a huge organization, how do you benefit from the global sort of footprint that BT has, but then benefit as well from the idiosyncrasies of the local environment and population?
Well, I'm a great believer. So whilst I lead the HR team for India, it kind of means I'm accountable from an HRLT perspective. I have an excellent HR director in country who has worked internationally, but is Indian by background, understands that. And I trust him to give me good guidance around what works, what doesn't. And I'll give you a great example. Our diversity and inclusion agenda looks at a sort of quite a European approach to things related to ethnicity and religion, for instance, but in the India context, that means very different things. And so it's really important to take time to listen and understand locally the context, what works, what doesn't, and actually what could be counterproductive to a more inclusive environment. So I think you have to listen locally, you have to trust that those people understand better that context, and then you have to assure yourself it sits within the confines of the values, the purpose, behavior you want for the organization, but has the freedom to deliver it in a way that resonates for the population locally.
Yeah, brilliant. Thanks, Dennis. Simon, if I move on to you and talk about inclusion as a growth driver, how do you convince the leaders at Drax that inclusion is not a nice to have? It's an imperative.
Yeah, well, we're quite lucky. We haven't had to do a huge amount of convincing. I think most like modern kind of corporate landscapes now understand that you need, it's that you need the beating heart of your organisation to feel a sense of belonging, for them to give to give you the effort and the discretional effort required to be successful. So, I think actually it's like diversity and equity can be more divisive and more difficult topics to talk about than inclusion, which I think most people are behind. For us, it comes back to the psychological safety piece, really, right? So when that's central to like a lot of the work that we do around inclusion. And I think if you get that right, if you have constructive challenge and you get greater contribution and you get kind of diverse, you get your truly diverse set of thoughts and experiences in decision making, and that gives you innovation, that gives you growth. I think there's been enough research out there for the last decade or so to kind of make that pretty non-negotiable. It's not really a negotiation. It's
Simon, what does psychological safety mean?
It means when someone can. It means someone can be their authentic self and feel safe to contribute to a discussion in whichever environment they're in, without any threat of kind of any sort of negative reaction or retaliation or anything.
How do you allow that to happen? Sorry, that's the wrong vocabulary. How does that come about? What do you have to put in place? What needs to take place that I can come to Drax and be me?
Yeah, well, that's interesting, because I think there's structural things that you can put in place, like we talked a little bit about, like the values and stuff, which I won't repeat because I think that is repetitive. And then I think Natalie said earlier it's around like leadership behaviours and how people actually show up. And I think it's also about having the confidence to like call out.
I'm not going to panic yet. I'm not sure if Simon has frozen. Natalie, are you still there?
I am still here.
Why don't you pick up on, because I know you talked about one of your values of transparency. And Simon, sorry, Simon, you just froze on us. So Natalie's just going to pick up on, because earlier you spoke about transparency, and sort of picking up on that point and psychological safety and how that comes about at N Brown.
So, I mean, a couple of things. I mean, we're very fortunate at N Brown that actually our kind of purpose is to make our customers look and feel amazing. And our credit sort of offer is serving a very underserved population. So that already is hardwired in our sort of purpose. But I think internally, what we've been doing, and we measure belonging as well, by the way, as part of our equity, diversity and inclusion, because belonging, we know, is a big driver of sort of, I guess, psychological safety and kind of people wanting to stay at N Brown. I guess some of the things that we've done this year is the data plus dialogue to try and shift behaviour and kind of create that transparency. So we actually ran a 5-week EDI&B program for line managers where we gave them the data. So here's the data in your area. So you can't hide behind the data, but actually, let's kind of deconstruct that data in a really safe way. Let's take the opportunity to have some of those more difficult conversations about EDI&B and create that transparency. And then let's take that, qualitative data that's been gathered as well through those workshops, looking at it alongside that quantitative piece, and then say, actually, well, what do we need to do in order to kind of shift the dial within each of those areas? So making it really, really kind of tangible and localized rather than it's something that comes from the top down. So we're kind of putting it into the hands of our leaders and saying, this is really, really important. But let's take the opportunity to help kind of, deconstruct and give you the kind of psychological safety to kind of have the kind of trickier conversations as well around it.
Yeah, love that. Daniel, in terms, I know that Philip Jansen and now Alison are big champions of inclusion. So rather than sort of talk about why it's a nice to have, how has inclusion helped BT grow?
So I think the key thing I'd choose in that area is probably the product design and the way in which we seek to win in the market. Because actually, as an organisation, we would like every member of the population to be a customer of BT. I mean, that would be an amazing growth and revenue line for us, of course. But in order to do that, you've got to represent the markets and the people and the towns and the cities that you operate within, both in the UK and globally. And so I think that if we are to do that, we've got to look, sound and feel like those populations, those communities that we operate in, and our people are the key people who both sell, service and understand our customer needs. And so there's a piece around growth in there for us that if you've got the inclusive environment that attracts and retains those individuals who want to work for us and have that local knowledge and can interact with customers and understand customers in a really authentic way, then actually that's going to increase the way in which we service, our net promoter scores, the quality of our products that we deliver to people. They're going to resonate much more, and that's going to allow us to grow and win in the markets. And for us, telco is incredibly competitive, right? It's a tight market. We've seen the Voda3 merger, which has changed that landscape. So even more important is how you then create that stickiness with customers and then the convergence of the product that we drive across that. That will only happen if our product design really is inclusive and resonates with people.
Thank you, Daniel. Simon, I think you're back.
I am indeed, yeah.
Yeah, you're back. And we got most of what you were saying earlier. We sort of moved the conversation on slightly. And just talk about, can you bring into life how inclusion has helped Drax grow? Can you think of particular examples where you just go, this just wouldn't have happened 20 years ago, it's happening now, and because of this, here's the cause and effect?
Yeah, I guess one of the places it shows up in our organisation the most is we have the technical term, but like an integrated operating model, which is essentially where we, in one part of the business, we produce and manufacture pellets. In another part of the business, we sell those pellets. And in a completely different part of the business, we look at like trading and supply and energy market dynamics, right? And previously, they were set up in, well, they are sort of different parts of the organisation structure, and we brought them all together in a way to basically deliver kind of better value through understanding like the whole kind of supply chain and the value chain and like the interdependencies. And I think in initiating that kind of integrated like op model, we spent a lot of time making sure that we built kind of like trust and transparency like within the actual people on those teams. I can share a few bits around what we did on that if of interest. But yeah, I think that for us, that's kind of like a story that jumped to mind.
Yeah, I know we focused on the positives on most of the stuff today. I suppose I'm going to ask all three of you the same question, if that's okay, just to probably wrap it up. And what's the biggest risk if organisations don't get this right, inclusion, in the next 3 to 5 years? Why don't we go with, let's start with Natalie.
Well, I think the biggest risk is you just won't be able to maintain or even continue with any type of competitive advantage. So, where does that kind of diversity of thought come from? Well, it doesn't come from having all of the same types of people in your organization. So for me, without that kind of EDI and B focus and that continued prioritization, I think as a business, you just won't have that competitive advantage.
Danny, what do you think about that? Or what's your views?
I would agree, and I think that particularly as technology advances and you're able to bring things like AI into the agenda, AI will do it for you. For your competitor, they'll do it better. They'll win. You will be left behind, and you won't have the draw for the next generation of both customers and hopefully future colleagues coming through. So in a multi-generational workforce, you've got to think about what you have today, but also what you're going to have in the future and how you nurture that.
And Simon?
Yeah, I agree with all of that. I think there's a huge bit on like productivity and performance and competitive edge, isn't there? But I think like the build would be higher attrition. You're not going to be able to retain your best people if you don't have the right culture, the right environment. Or maybe even worse than higher attrition, you'll have a load of disengaged people that are hanging on to their jobs and not performing for you. So I think, they're pretty big risks alongside the competitive edge piece.
You guys were far more concise than anticipated, which gives us time for another question. Can you all, I'm going to give you an opportunity to shine a light on your organisation. Say, can you bring to light a specific initiative in this arena that has had a multiplier effect on the business? Simon, you're in the camera shot now, but if it's either Natalie or Daniel got an idea, just shout and your face will magically appear.
I don't mind going. I've got
Okay.
well, mine's a bit of a back to basics, actually. So we spent a lot of time, as lots of organisations do, thinking about leaders' roles in this. And it was very much more in the sort of usual areas of how do we talk about protected characteristics and the environment people operate within, what can you do as a leader? We actually ran an initiative last year, back to basics, in some of our regional teams, operations centres, basic good management and human behaviour. And we started to uncover things we didn't necessarily want to be happening in our organisation. And then we did some real grassroots fixes. And the impact that had on inclusion, but also confidence to raise and speak up, was huge. And actually, if I look at everything we did in this space, in that part of my business last year, that was probably most impactful. Back to basics, manager-led at a grassroots level. And it's had a really great impact on trust.
But a great example. Natalie, Simon?
I'll jump in.
Yeah.
So, obviously, I talked about the kind of challenging macroeconomic environment, particularly from a retail perspective. So, one of the things that we continue to do is how do we maintain that sustainable cost base? So, this year, what we've done is launched an Innovate to Elevate program, and actually through that, encouraged ideas bottom up through the organization, because we aren't close to the coalface in terms of where those opportunities are to drive efficiencies and create that kind of sustainability. So we have encouraged colleagues to identify opportunities, and we've incentivized them to do that. And we've had some fantastic kind of ideas that have come from the organization bottom up, and that for me is really kind of living and breathing what you kind of talk about. So we value the colleague voice, and we want to hear and take on board what our colleagues have got to kind of tell us.
So important, absolutely critical. Simon, looks like before I close up, the final words might be yours.
Okay, great. Well, keep it brief, but we work with a brilliant company called Core Performance that came from the world of like elite sports, and essentially they helped us with this resilience and well-being journey. And in a nutshell, it's a program that lasts for 6 months. You do a set of bloods and biometrics at the beginning of it and at the end of it, and then you get Garmin wearable devices which help people understand sleep, nutrition, exercise, and we use an app to like track mood and the impact of those on moods. And then you have a consultation with a mental performance coach and a kind of a doctor within that. And the idea is really to help people create simple habits that make them healthier in their whole life, really. So, yeah.
I love it. Drax are leading the way for our next Olympic challenge. You're creating a team, a company of Olympians. That brings to a close the end of day one. I've got a couple of notes from the guys. Natalie, I love leading with curiosity. Simon talked about culture as an organization's personality, and I love Daniel when he was talking about going out in amongst the people of BT and then giving them the confidence to raise and speak. So important to feel like you will be heard when you communicate. Fabulous, fabulous, fabulous. Thank you so much for your contribution and to all the other contributors today, because that closes day one. We'll be back tomorrow at 9 o'clock in the morning. That is UK time. For those of you who are joining us from abroad, use your Zoom link to join us then. And if you do one thing the rest of the day, be kind. Have a lovely afternoon.